Čekamo Ivu Novak. Cijenjene dame i gospodo, dobar vam dan i dobrodošli u akvatiku. O razgledavanju akvarija ćemo nešto kasnije, sada imamo neke puno važnije stvari o kojima želimo govoriti. Hvala vam lijepa na dolasku na svečano predstavljanje programa Civilno društvo u sklopu drugog švicarskog doprinosa Švicarsko-hrvatskog programa suradnje. Pozdravljam vas u ime organizatora Ureda za udruge Vlade Republike Hrvatske u čijoj nadležnosti se nalazi program Civilno društvo namijenjen organizacijama civilnog društva iz kojih će se financirati projekti unutar 4 komponente. Obrazovanje za održivi razvoj, volontiranje, mikroprojekti te društveno korisno učenje. Upravo društveno korisno učenje predstavit ćemo danas na ovom našem okupljanju. Bila nam je želja svečano obilježiti početak provedbe programa koji se nadovezuje na vrlo uspješno provedene 2 darovnice namijenjene civilnom društvu unutar prvog švicarskog doprinosa. Uskoro će u ovom programu biti potpisana i deklaracija o suradnji gradova i organizacija civilnog društva u Republici Hrvatskoj, a potpisat će gradonačelnik grada domaćina, grada Karlovca, gospodin Damir Mandić. Potpisivanje deklaracije održat će se u nazočnosti njegove ekscelencije gospodina Ursa Hamera, veleposlanika Švicarske konfederacije, koji će nam se malo kasnije obratiti i otvoriti ovu konferenciju. Uvažavajući da je razvijeno civilno društvo jedna od pretpostavki i mjerila demokracije i stabilnosti političkog sustava, a suradnja javne vlasti s građanima i civilnim društvom u stvaranju, provedbi i praćenju javnih politika jedno od temeljnih obilježja države koja služi svojim građanima, potpisivanjem deklaracije povodom današnje uvodne konferencije drugog švicarskog doprinosa unutar Švicarsko-hrvatskog programa suradnje, Ured za udruge Vlade Republike Hrvatske ovim putem naglašava važnost, želju i spremnost za poticanje razvoja suradnje i partnerskog odnosa gradova u Republici Hrvatskoj s organizacijama civilnog društva. Pozivam odmah na početku gospođu Helenu Beus, ovlaštenu za obavljanje poslova ravnatelja Ureda za udruge Vlade Republike Hrvatske, da nam se uvodno obrati i kaže nešto više o ulozi Ureda za udruge u provedbi drugog švicarskog doprinosa Švicarsko-hrvatskog programa suradnje. Gospođo Beus, dobar dan, izvolite.
Poštovane dame i gospodo, na početku osobita mi je čast pozdraviti njegovu ekscelenciju gospodina Ursa Hamera, veleposlanika Švicarske konfederacije u Republici Hrvatskoj. Pozdravljam izaslanicu predsjednika Vlade Republike Hrvatske gospođu Ivu Novak, ravnateljicu Uprave za strateško planiranje i koordinaciju fondova Europske unije, Ministarstva regionalnog razvoja i fondova Europske unije. Pozdravljam županicu Karlovačke županije, gospođu Martinu Furdek-Hajdin, gradonačelnika grada Karlovca, gospodina Damira Mandića. Pozdravljam isto tako i zamjenika upraviteljice gospodina Luku Bogdana, Nacionalne zaklade za razvoj civilnog društva. Pozdravljam predstavnike Ministarstva znanosti, obrazovanja i mladih, gospodina Momira Karina, to jest gospođu Vesnu, ravnateljicu uprave. I pozdravljam sve predstavnike organizacija civilnog društva, tijela državne uprave, javnih ustanova i jedinica lokalne i područne regionalne samouprave. Pozdravljam predstavnike medija, suradnike i goste. Svima želim dobrodošlicu na konferenciju drugog švicarskog doprinosa Švicarsko-hrvatskog programa suradnje Civilno društvo. Današnja konferencija nastavak je suradnje uspostavljene u okviru prvog švicarskog doprinosa, Švicarsko-hrvatskog programa suradnje, u sklopu kojeg su bila financirana 52 projekta. Ovim projektima potaknete su promjene iz područja volontiranja, društveno korisnog učenja i suradnje organizacija civilnog društva, javnih ustanova, jedinica lokalne i područne samouprave u svojim lokalnim zajednicama. U ovim projektima sudjelovale su 94 udruge iz Republike Hrvatske i 10 organizacija iz Švicarske konfederacije. Drugi švicarski doprinos Švicarsko-hrvatskog programa suradnje potpisanog 28. listopada prošle godine postavlja osnovu za raspisivanje novih javnih poziva kojima je cilj potaknuti promjene u zajednici. Riječ je o 4 javna poziva iz sljedećih područja: obrazovanje za održivi razvoj, mikroprojekti, volontiranje, društveno korisno učenje. Ukupna vrijednost darovnice Švicarske konfederacije kojom će se financirati projekti iznosi 7,62 milijuna švicarskih franaka uz dodatnih 10% hrvatskog sufinanciranja. Ja bih prvenstveno voljela zahvaliti veleposlaniku, veleposlanstvu Švicarske konfederacije, svim isto tako i zaposlenicima koji su sudjelovali na pripremi ovog programa. Isto tako zahvaljujem kolegama iz Ministarstva regionalnog razvoja i fondova Europske unije. I nadamo se da će ova konferencija ohrabriti i potaknuti organizacije civilnog društva da se jave na ove pozive i tako doprinesu promjenama u lokalnoj zajednici. Želim svima uspješnu konferenciju, hvala vam na suradnji i puno sreće dalje u prijavi na nove projekte. Zahvaljujem.
Hvala lijepa gospođi Beus. S nama je i gospođa Martina Furdek-Hajdin, županica Karlovačke županije. Gospođo Furdek-Hajdin, dobar dan u vašoj županiji, izvolite.
Hvala vam lijepo. Dobar dan svima. Dobrodošli u grad Karlovac i Karlovačku županiju. Posebno pozdravljam vašu gospodinu ekscelenciju, gospodina Hamera sa vašim suradnicima, ravnateljice obiju ministarstva regionalnog razvoja, fondova Europske unije i našu dragu gospođu Šerepac, suradnicu na mnogobrojnim projektima, Luku i sve vas predstavnike i drugih institucija, ali i udruga civilnog društva. Uvijek kad govorimo o civilnom društvu, onda uvijek govorimo i o tome koliko se javna sredstva i neka institucija daje podršku samom angažmanu i radu udruga, koji zaista ima u cijelom spektru našeg postojanja i života, i kad bi neko krenuo i pobrojavati, dugo bi taj niz bio i dugo bi nam vremena trebalo i za izdvojiti. Međutim, svi smo svjesni koliko je civilno društvo glas onog jednog pojedinca koji možda nije dovoljno glasan i koji nije dovoljno snažan da bi ga čuli oni koji ga trebaju čuti. I to su ona vrata koja se otvaraju upravo za potrebe društva i koja nas koji radimo u javnom sustavu, koji upravljamo javnim resursima i financijskim i ljudskim i onim materijalnim, osvješćuje koliko trebamo dati podršku takvom jednom pojedincu. Dugi niz, iza mene će govoriti gradonačelnik, osvrnut će se zasigurno koliko se i grad jedan posvećuje radu udruga i koliko je zajedničkih projekata realizirano, ali ponekad dolazimo naravno i do onoga koliko u te udruge ulažemo i koliko smo im ona podrška da one mogu opstati i raditi svoj tako vrijedan rad. Mi imamo naravno kroz naše upravne odjele i redovite javne pozive. Neću ih sada posebno pobrojavati, to je kultura i sport i branitelji i udruge koje se bave socijalom i radom u zdravstvu. Udrugama koje se bave poduzetništvom, dakle i u gospodarstvu, u turizmu, u organizaciji brojnih manifestacija, u zaštiti potrošača, ali i zaštiti životinja. Dakle, spektar je zaista širok. Ono što u Karlovačkoj županiji u proračunu mi na neki način pratimo, ali osnažujemo s obzirom da znamo da je cijena života rasla. 25. godine osigurali smo ukupno 735.000 eura upravo koji dosežu do udruga putem javnih poziva. I tu se u okviru nalazi oko 400 udruga koje pronađu i ovako partnera u Karlovačkoj županiji. Međutim, evo ja bih za danas izdvojila još jedno iskustvo koje imamo sa udrugama, a to je zaštita rijeke Mrežnice i potaklo me upravo odabir akvatike kao lokacije u konačnici grada Karlovca za ovu konferenciju, zato što smo mi, za one koji nisu iz Karlovca ili Karlovačke županije, rijeka Mrežnica je biser koji smo mi već jedno 10-15 godina imali namjeru zaštititi. I nikako, stalno su ti procesi započinjali, nikad nisu dovršeni bili do kraja iz x razloga. Međutim, evo 22. godine odlučili smo da tome treba doći kraj i dogodila se suradnja sa TNC-om, znači to je The Nature Conservancy, udrugom koja je, sjedište je u Americi. I zaista smo u tom procesu bili partner. Oni su imali projekt zajedno za rijeke i mi smo bili aktivni sudionik tog projekta. Udruga nam je pomogla da nas usmjeri i u komunikaciji sa javnošću, da nas osvijesti da u određenim elementima, poštujući zakonske okvire, moramo isto tako biti fleksibilni prema potrebama terena, vremena u kojem živimo. Imali smo veliku priliku i snažnu priliku vidjeti i druga iskustva i ne ponoviti možda greške oni koji su to već učinili. Ono što je specifično, isto tako ponekad govorimo o tome da udruge trebaju javni novac. Mi smo u ovoj prilici od udruge dobili određena sredstva gdje smo odradili određene dokumente koje ne bi tako snažno i brzo mogli odraditi da upravo nismo imali donaciju same udruge. Evo, to je možda nešto specifično što se rijetko kada dogodi da udruga ima financijsku snagu poduprijeti jedan zakonski proces koji radimo mi. I ono što se dogodilo kao odličan rezultat ove suradnje bila je jedna izložba koja se ovdje ostvarila, isto tako jer je pratilo i fotografiranje lijepih krajolika u cijeloj ovoj regiji, ali mi smo u 3. mjesecu prošle godine i donijeli konačnu odluku o zaštiti naše rijeke. Velika je zahvala takvoj udruzi i uvijek ćemo biti spremni biti partner takvom obliku inicijative jer i on postoji. Ali da se vratimo na današnju temu, ja želim izraziti veliku zahvalu Vladinoj udruzi za udruge, ali jednako tako i državi Švicarskoj i općenito paketu financijskom koji nam dolazi u našu domovinu, koja upravo može na ovakav način biti osnažena i steći određena nova iskustva koja ponekad u nekim društvima koja su možda i pedalj razvijenija u tom smislu naučiti upravo i od njih kako osnažiti udruge civilnog društva. Uvijek su dobar korektiv, od kritike ne treba bježati, ona je dobronamjerna i ona nas čini takvima da budemo bolji u poslu koji činimo. Hvala vam svima što nam upravo na takav način sudjelujete i što upravo tom međusobnom suradnjom, međusobnom korekcijom jedni drugih činimo ovaj svijet boljim za sve nas koji ovdje živimo. Hvala lijepo.
Hvala lijepa županici i hvala što ste nam skrenuli pozornost na ovu predivnu izložbu. Razgledajte malo kasnije, upijte nešto od tih ljepota lijepe naše za koju svi radimo. Sretno s novim projektima u ovoj godini. Pozivamo sada i gospodina Damira Mandića, gradonačelnika grada domaćina, grada Karlovca, da nam se obrati. Izvolite.
Evo, ja vas sve srdačno pozdravljam u ime svih nas iz Gradske uprave grada Karlovca, u ime moje zamjenice gospođe Ivane Fočić, poseban pozdrav veleposlaniku gospodinu Ursu Hameru, naravno i ekipi iz ministarstva, iz Ureda za udruge Vlade Republike Hrvatske. Naravno da ja sad na početku moram kao gradonačelnik grada Karlovca osvijestiti vam da morate biti posebno sretni što ste u gradu Karlovcu. Ovo je veliki dan za vas. Naravno, mi smo grad koji je prepoznat kao grad na 4 rijeke, grad parkova, grad kulturne baštine, ali mi se volimo nazivati kao grad, da smo grad susreta. Nekako smo na razmeđu puteva, pa smo idealni da se ljudi u Karlovcu nađu, vide, da se susretnu. Pa evo, i ova konferencija neka bude upravo upravo na tom tragu. Vjerujem da današnji rad, odnosno sve ono što budemo ili budete radili, će stalno pridonijeti da i na razini nekih novih informacija koje ćete dobiti, a i na temelju onih iskustava od prije, i ovaj doprinos švicarske vlade na neki način svima omogući korak, 2, 3 naprijed. Kad govorimo o civilnom društvu, opet subjektivno, ali ovako iskreno iz srca, ja moram naglasiti da mi u gradu Karlovcu već dugi niz godina stvarno imamo jednu ne samo kvalitetnu, entuzijastičnu scenu civilnog društva na svim poljima, na svim područjima. Naravno da sa razine proračuna mi nastojimo biti korisni, sada da ne ulazim u detalje svih tih iznosa koji su na raspolaganju udrugama civilnog društva, ali ono što nam je posebno izazovno, moram to reći, to je da pokušamo biti svima na raspolaganju. I druga stvar koja nam je posebno izazovna sa razine uprave je onaj element koji udrugama na neki način je temelj njihovog rada, a to je prostor koji im treba. Tu na neki način i zakonska regulativa nam stavlja izazove, neću reći probleme, ali to je ono nešto što stvarno nastojimo i trudimo se pronalaziti rješenja. Sa svoje strane, tu bih istaknuo onaj jedan element društvenog života koji je definitivno vezan uz udruge civilnog društva. Ja to njima često puta prilikom raznih prigoda i naglasim, one definitivno grad čine boljim. I tu ne mislim sad samo na ove aktivnosti koje su vezane uz neka humanitarna djelovanja ili neke socijalne aktivnosti, odnosno aktivnosti koje su vezane uz podršku onima među nama kojima je podrška u bilo kojoj osnovi potrebna, nego stvarno i na razini kreativnosti. Druga stvar koja je kod nas u Karlovcu vrijedna istaknuti, to je element volonterstva. Svi koji rade u udrugama, barem ono što sam ja uspio s vremenom pohvatati, vidjet će da uvijek postoji onaj jedan entuzijazam koji nije nekog širokog spektra ljudi, nego uglavnom u nekom uskom krugu ljudi, ali taj u biti entuzijazam je, u temelju njega je volonterstvo. I to je posebna društvena vrijednost koju možda onako mogu reći, i tu ću se složiti s našom županicom, nama nekad koji smo u politici ili na tim pozicijama moći odlučivanja svašta nešto promakne. Ali definitivno je to posebna vrijednost i tu mislim da mi u Karlovcu s te strane stvarno možemo biti ponosni na najveći broj ljudi koji rade u udrugama civilnog društva. I zadnje što bih ovdje istaknuo, a mislim da ćemo se tu vjerojatno svi složiti, ova podrška na koncu i Švicarske, odnosno vlade Švicarske, u nekom financijskom iznosu je naravno na tragu i onih drugih programa, da ne kažem fondova, koje mi u Hrvatskoj možemo koristiti. Ono što se pokazuje, a u Karlovcu definitivno ja mogu kao gradonačelnik svjedočiti i u kontekstu velikih projekata koji se sufinanciraju sredstvima van proračuna grada Karlovca, to su ljudi koji to provode. Mi, govorim s razine uprave, tvrtki i ustanova, stvarno imamo blagoslov, mogu to tako reći, da imamo ljude koji to znaju provesti, koji znaju pripremiti projekt, koji ga znaju provesti u konačnici, da taj projekt na kraju bude stvarno građanima na raspolaganju, na usluzi. Ali ono što je posebno važno, u udrugama isto tako ima puno kvalitetnih, motiviranih, stručnih ljudi koji isto tako to znaju odraditi. Dosta materijalnih sredstava s kojima udruge raspolažu, na temelju kojih provode svoje projekte, oni su u stvari zavrijedili upravo svojim radom. Evo, držim da naše neko iskustvo Karlovca, govorim naravno u okviru našeg grada, je stvarno dobro i naše raspoloženje, naše usmjerenje prema udrugama je kontinuirano i ono što je posebno važno, vjerujem da svi zajedno u svom poslu i u svojim aktivnostima, u svom prostoru rada podržavamo jedni druge i zajedno rastemo. Evo, ja vam želim uspješan rad.
Hvala lijepa gradonačelniku Mandiću. Pozivam izaslanicu predsjednika Vlade Republike Hrvatske, ravnateljicu Uprave za strateško planiranje i koordinaciju fondova Europske unije, Ministarstva regionalnog razvoja i fondova Europske unije, gospođu Ivo Novak, da nam se obrati.
Lijep pozdrav svima. Poštovana županice, gospođo Furtek-Hajding, poštovani veleposlaniče, vaša ekscelencijo Hamer, poštovani gradonačelniče Mandić, poštovane kolegice i kolege, draga Helena, Luka, Vesna, poštovani kolega Roland i svi vaši suradnici iz Švicarskog veleposlanstva, poštovane kolegice i kolege, dragi uzvanici, evo ga, posebna mi je čast, evo i danas prilika da vas pozdravim ispred predsjednika Vlade Republike Hrvatske, gospodina Andreja Plenkovića, ali isto tako ispred svojeg ministra regionalnog razvoja i fondova Europske unije, gospodina Šimerlića. I ne mogu vam reći koliko mi je drago da evo ga sam i na ovome susretu pozvana da vam se kratko obratim uvodno, a vezano uz program civilnog društva. Program civilnog društva je zapravo program koji je jedan uspješan nastavak programa, i to ne jednog, nego čak 2 programa iz prve švicarske omotnice. I zapravo predstavlja kontinuitet kvalitete rada i zajedničke suradnje švicarskih partnera i hrvatskih partnera. I u tom smislu zapravo nam osigurava jedan rast, ne samo u našoj bilateralnoj suradnji, nego u onome što zapravo učimo jedni od drugih, a to je cilj i temeljna vrijednost civilnog društva, a to je solidarnost. Evo ga, kad nisam među prvima koji se obraćaju, uvijek je bilo korisno poslušati i oslušati što je rekla i županica, što je rekao i gospodin gradonačelnik i moja draga kolegica Helena. Znači, solidarnost i volonterstvo. Ma oni su kor civilnog društva. A to je ono što u svijetu možemo sada prepoznati da počinje se smanjivati. Individualizam je jedan od vjerojatno ključnih otegotnih okolnosti koje mogu umanjiti djelovanje civilnog društva. Stoga su upravo i ovakvi programi koje sada imamo u sklopu drugog švicarskog doprinosa. Ali isto tako i svi programi koji se financiraju i podupiru putem Vlade Republike Hrvatske, ali isto tako putem jedinice lokalne regionalne samouprave, kao što ste i vi spomenuli, znači su bitni. Zato da jačamo i njegujemo ono što će danas, sutra ostati našim mladima. A to je, ukoliko nemamo izgrađene kapacitete, ukoliko nemamo one koji žele predati svoje dragocjeno vrijeme, koji nemaju znanja i iskustva da mogu sudjelovati u takvim procesima, volonterstvo, solidarnost, organizacije civilnog društva neće postojati. Stoga je upravo i ovaj program ključan, a kako bi mogli izgraditi kapacitete, jer se upravo osvrćemo prema onima koji su najbitniji, a to su djeca i mladi. Ali nisu samo oni. Mi ovdje izgrađujemo kapacitete i njihovih nastavnika, učitelja, profesora. Isto tako povezujemo jedinice lokalne samouprave sa organizacijama civilnog društva, ali isto sa visokoškolskim ustanovama. I tu ima još jako puno aktivnosti koje su predviđene u ovom programu, ali zapravo ono što je bitno je i onaj segment bilateralne suradnje. Ja vjerujem da ćemo to danas i dodatno čuti, a kroz provedbu i dodatno međusobno razmijeniti iskustvo između partnera u Švicarskoj konfederaciji iz organizacija civilnog društva i onih koji su u Republici Hrvatskoj. Ja vjerujem da je pred nama jedan divan program koji će polučiti brojne suradnje, brojne projekte, veliki broj sudionika koji će biti uključeni u njegovoj provedbi. Želim se zahvaliti na dugoj i odličnoj suradnji sa švicarskim veleposlanstvom, sa svim institucijama Švicarske konfederacije. Želim se isto tako zahvaliti domaćinima današnjim, isto tako Uredu za udruge Vlade Republike Hrvatske koji je upravitelj programa, mojim dragim kolegama iz Nacionalne koordinacijske jedinice i svima vama koji ćete na bilo koji način surađivati s nama na ovom programu. Želim vam puno uspjeha u prijavi i u provedbi projekata i postizanju zajedničkih ciljeva. Hvala lijepa.
Hvala lijepa gospođi Novak. Evo pozivam sada veleposlanika Švicarske konfederacije u Republici Hrvatskoj, njegovu ekscelenciju gospodina Ursa Hamera, da nam se obrati i otvori ovu konferenciju.
Dear Helena Beus, Head of the Government Office for Cooperation with NGOs, dear Martina Furdek-Hajdin, Karlovac County Prefect, dear Mr. Mayor of the City of Karlovac, Mr. Damir Mandic, dear Eva Novak, Envoy of the Prime Minister and Head of Directorate for Strategic Planning and EU Funds Coordination in the Ministry of Regional Development and EU Funds, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this significant event marking the launch of the Civic Engagement Program, part of the second Swiss-Croatian cooperation program. And I also would like to thank the previous speakers for your valuable insights and for your important contributions. Today's gathering represents more than a formal start. It is a recognition of the shared commitment of Croatia and Switzerland to strengthening civil society, promoting inclusive development, and fostering democratic values across communities. This event is a testament to our strong partnership, founded on mutual respect, a spirit of collaboration, and our common belief in the vital role of civil society in shaping a better future. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm really particularly pleased to launch the Civic Engagement Program in Karlovac, a city that, with its rich history and vibrant community, is an example, and you mentioned it also, a strong NGO scene. It is an example of the potential for civic engagement. Local civil society organizations here play a vital role in shaping the social, cultural, and economic life of the city. As we reflect on the achievements of the first Swiss contribution program, we are reminded of the impressive achievements made through the NGO and partnership block grants. Partnerships have been developed and strengthened between civil society organizations, schools, and local community actors in raising awareness on sustainable development. Civil society organizations have been able to contribute to economic and social cohesion and demonstrate that they are important actors in development and in participation. The cooperation between Croatian and Swiss organizations during this period has laid a strong foundation for the continuation of our efforts. For Switzerland, civic engagement and democratic participation are central to our identity. As a country shaped by direct democracy, we believe it is essential for citizens to have the tools and opportunities to actively influence the decisions that affect their lives. This belief drives our commitment to supporting civil society organizations in Croatia and beyond. Through this program, Switzerland aims to share its experiences in mobilizing civil society as a development actor, whether in defending social rights, delivering services, fostering participation, or promoting social transformation. These principles have been integral to Switzerland's stability and innovation over many years. Ladies and gentlemen, the Civic Engagement Program has been carefully designed to address Croatia's priorities as identified through close consultation with the Government Office for Cooperation with NGOs and the Ministry of Regional Development and EU funds. The focus on promoting civil participation through increased volunteering also reflects the strong alignment of interests between Croatian and Swiss civil society actors. This program is not limited to a specific region or community. It is a national effort. Its goal is to strengthen the capacities of civil society organizations across Croatia, empowering them to engage more effectively in democratic processes, reduce social disparities, and promote inclusivity. Croatia, ladies and gentlemen, you know it, has a vibrant and diverse civil society, ranging from grassroots organizations to well-established networks. This program will create opportunities for organizations from all sectors to enhance their impact, whether through service provision, environmental advocacy, or policy dialogue. We are therefore particularly pleased that today's event includes contributions from Swiss civil society organizations who will share their experiences and insights, and I'm delighted that we have also one person physically present here today. A special welcome to you. Thank you. The Swiss civil sector has long been a cornerstone of our democracy, playing key roles in areas such as advocacy, social innovation, and the defense of human rights. This exchange of ideas and practices is one of the most valuable aspects of the civic engagement program. It allows both countries to learn from one another. The program will also support projects that foster partnerships between Croatian and Swiss organizations, creating long-lasting connections and mutual learning opportunities. We are confident that these collaborations will inspire innovative approaches to the challenges faced by civil society in both countries. We are excited to move forward with the next steps and the soon-to-be-launched first call for proposals that will provide a platform for civil society organizations to translate their ideas into action, fostering positive change in their commitments, in their communities. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to everyone who has contributed to making this program a reality, from our Croatian partners to our Swiss colleagues. Your dedication and cooperation has been invaluable. Let us therefore continue to work together, leveraging the strength of our civil societies to build more inclusive, resilient, and democratic communities. Ladies and gentlemen, the previous speakers already mentioned, especially the Župan and the mayor, the real importance of Karlovac as a crossroad, as a symbol of the four rivers that you have, and which is also reflected in this exhibition. And I've been the first time here, and I'm very glad that we have this opportunity to celebrate this launching of the second Swiss contribution here, because we have, symbolically speaking, the flow, the river of the first Swiss contribution, elementing now the source of the second Swiss contribution. I've been so far only familiar with the water from Karlovac in a slightly modified form, but I'm looking forward also that another element of water, the aquavita, that we can learn it today after the official part. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Hvala lijepa njegovoj ekscelenciji gospodinu Ursu Hameru. Još jedna informacija, dok smo mi ovdje u dvorani, moram vam reći da se održavaju 2 radionice za djecu i mlade. Govorili smo puno o djeci i mladima na temu održivog razvoja ovdje u knjižnici u Akvatici. A sada je vrijeme da pristupimo tom svečanom trenutku potpisivanja deklaracije o suradnji gradova i organizacija civilnog društva u Republici Hrvatskoj, koju će potpisati gradonačelnik grada Karlovca gospodin Damir Mandić u nazočnosti njegove ekscelencije gospodina Ursa Hamera. Gospodine Mandiću, izvolite. Pljesak slobodno i hvala gradu Karlovcu što je pristupio deklaraciji. Izvrsno. Ovo je bila formalnost, tek nakon ovoga vas čeka zapravo pravi posao, gradonačelniče. Hvala vam lijepa. Unutar Švicarsko-hrvatskog programa suradnje, drugog švicarskog doprinosa za program Civilno društvo, čuli ste već uvodno, namijenjeno je 7,6 milijuna švicarskih franaka, a kojima će se financirati najbolji projekti organizacija civilnog društva unutar 4 poziva na dostavu projektnih prijedloga. Pozivam gospođu Jelenu Princivali, voditeljicu Odjela za strateško planiranje, programiranje i informiranje Ureda za udruge, da nam predstavi program.
Hvala Ivana. Evo, dopustite mi prije nego što krenem sa samom uvodnom prezentacijom da i ja pozdravim sve vas ovdje okupljene, posebno gospodina Ursa Hamera, veleposlanika Švicarske konfederacije, zatim sve kolegice i kolege iz Ureda za švicarski doprinos u Hrvatskoj, Roland, Stela, Pero, Miša, gospođu Ivu Novak, izaslanicu predsjednika Vlade Republike Hrvatske, ravnateljicu uprave u Ministarstvu regionalnog razvoja i fondova Europske unije, kao i sve kolegice i kolege iz Ministarstva regionalnog razvoja koji su ovdje s nama, ali koji ovdje nisu mogli biti zbog ranije preuzetih obaveza, ispred naše nacionalne koordinacijske jedinice. Bez svih vas zajedničkim trudom mi ne bismo ni bili ovdje danas i pričali o uvodnoj konferenciji drugog švicarskog doprinosa. Također zahvaljujem i našem gradu domaćinu. Evo, mi planiramo, vidjet ćete kasnije u prezentaciji, 4 poziva. Prvi poziv će biti u području obrazovanja za održivi razvoj. Zbog toga smo i organizirali u ovom predivnom prostoru knjižnice i jednu radionicu, odnosno 2 radionice, 2 grupe radionica za djecu. Ja bih sad evo polako krenula sa prezentacijom. Uvodni govornici, uvaženi gosti su nam već rekli koji su to bili sve benefiti u prvom švicarskom doprinosu i zapravo na tragu tih pozitivnih rezultata i učinaka koje je ostavio prvi švicarski doprinos. Nastavljena je i dalje bilateralna suradnja i ulaganje u civilno društvo u Hrvatskoj i u drugom švicarskom doprinosu. Ovdje je jedna infografika, ne znam da li se vidi zbog prezentacije, možda da malo pomaknemo, da li će sad biti bolje. Jer naime, osim što se ovdje okupljamo uživo, mi organiziramo i ovo događanje i hibridnim putem, obzirom da je jako puno udruga iz cijele Hrvatske željelo doći, ali zbog loših vremenskih uvjeta neki su zapeli iz Dalmacije i nisu nam se mogli pridružiti. Mi smo također organizirali i autobusni prijevoz za sve vas ovdje iz Zagreba, tako da evo, uživajte. Nadam se da će vam ovo biti korisno. U svakom slučaju, na tragu ovih pozitivnih rezultata, Ured za udruge je izradio i jedan kompendij, odnosno prezentirao je sva iskustva organizacije civilnog društva iz prvog doprinosa na jednom mjestu koju možete potražiti i na našim mrežnim stranicama. Također napravili smo i promotivni video film koji možemo eventualno pustiti na kraju ako bude vremena, ali u svakom slučaju možete ga potražiti na našim web stranicama i na YouTube kanalu Ureda za udruge. U svakom slučaju, kao što sam već i rekla, znači na tragu rezultata prvog švicarskog doprinosa, potpisivanjem okvirnog sporazuma o provedbi drugog švicarskog doprinosa između Hrvatske i Švicarske konfederacije u listopadu 2022. godine, te donošenjem zakona o potvrđivanju okvirnog sporazuma u svibnju 2023. godine stvoreni su preduvjeti za korištenje 45,7 milijuna švicarskih franaka namijenjenih u drugom švicarskom doprinosu za 4 tematska programa. Jedan od tih je i civilno društvo za koje je ukupno osigurano 7,62 milijuna švicarskih franaka. Institucije koje su uključene u sustav upravljanja i provedbe, već smo ih neke spomenuli, sa švicarske i hrvatske strane, naravno sa hrvatske strane Ministarstvo regionalnog razvoja i fondova Europske unije kao nacionalna koordinacijska jedinica, zatim Ministarstvo financija kao tijelo za ovjeravanje, AFKO služba za koordinaciju sustava suzbijanja nepravilnosti i prijevara, ARPA i upravitelj programa, u ovom slučaju za ovaj program to je Ured za udruge. Sa švicarske strane, to je naravno Državno tajništvo za gospodarstvo, Agencija za razvoj i suradnju, te Ured za švicarski doprinos Švicarskog veleposlanstva, čije djelatnike srdačno i da opet pozdravljam. Kao što sam već spomenula, znači Ured za udruge je u ovom drugom švicarskom doprinosu upravitelj programa. A opći cilj, kao što su već uvodni govornici spomenuli, je jačanje demokratskih struktura i procesa kroz građanski angažman kako bi se smanjile ekonomske i socijalne razlike. Ovim drugim švicarskim doprinosom u programu Civilno društvo financirat će se aktivnosti koje su odabrane u okviru poziva za dostavu prijedloga i pružat će upravljačku potporu organizacijama od civilnog društva, a posebna pozornost će se posvetiti manje razvijenim područjima s ciljem doprinosa ravnoteži i socijalnom ekonomskom rastu u Republici Hrvatskoj. 4 su tematske komponente. Prva, obrazovanje u održivom razvoju. Mi smo zapravo namjerno odabrali grad Karlovac, obzirom da prvo željeli smo se malo maknuti od Zagreba, ali i zato što prvi natječaj koji planiramo raspisati, nadamo se već do kraja siječnja ove godine, vezan je za ovo prvo područje obrazovanja u održivom razvoju, a grad Karlovac kao grad na 4 rijeke, grad bogate povijesti i brojnih organizacija civilnog društva baš u ovom području održivog razvoja i zaštite okoliša, smatrali smo da bi bilo možda ovako baš prigodno da prva konferencija, ova uvodna, započne baš ovdje. Ovo je, vidjet ćete, tablica indikativnog plana objave poziva. Samo ovaj prvi poziv obrazovanja u održivom razvoju je čak bio planiran za kraj 2024. godine, ali obzirom na neke predradnje, jer mi smo, osim da bismo što kvalitetnije pripremili natječajnu dokumentaciju, proveli smo interno savjetovanje prvo sa bivšim korisnicima prvog švicarskog doprinosa, a zatim i javno savjetovanje koje je trajalo 30 dana o nacrtu ključnih elemenata samog poziva, tako da se to malo odužilo. Planiramo ga objaviti krajem siječnja ove godine. Sama provedba projekata će trajati između 24 i 36 mjeseci. Sljedeći natječaj koji će biti je uvezan za mikroprojekte. Planiramo ga ožujak-travanj ove godine. Ti projekti će trajati u okvirno oko 12 do 24 mjeseca. Zatim programi društveno korisnog učenja svibanj 2025. Također provedba će trajati 24 do 36 mjeseci. I posljednji natječaj, ali ne manje važan naravno, vezan za volontiranje, za unapređenje volontiranja koji bi trebao biti do kraja 2025. godine. Sad nekoliko kratkih informacija o svakom tom pozivu. U sklopu ovog prvog natječaja vezano za obrazovanje za održivi razvoj, cilj je ojačati doprinos organizacija civilnog društva, obrazovanju o održivom razvoju, na način da želimo ovim pozivom jačati ulogu organizacija civilnog društva u razvoju kompetencija djece i mladih o pitanjima održivog razvoja, te osnažiti partnerstva organizacija civilnog društva, škola, lokalne zajednice. Za ovaj natječaj predviđeno je ukupno 2.620.000 eura, odnosno u protuvrijednosti u švicarskim francima, od čega doprinos od strane Švicarske iznosi 2.358.000 eura. Preostali dio je osiguran od strane proračuna Republike Hrvatske, a dio će sredstava, očekuje se da će dio sredstava pokriti i sami korisnici, odnosno prijavitelji na ovaj natječaj, ali ne brinite, Ured za udruge od 2011. godine raspisuje javni poziv za sufinanciranje EU projekata udruga kao i projekata koji su financirani iz nekih drugih inozemnih sredstava, tako da ćete u svakom slučaju svoju financijsku konstrukciju svakako zatvoriti i evo, nadamo se da će se s time možda i ovaj planirani neki okvirni broj projekata od 10 do 15 možda i povećati. Sljedeće tematsko područje, ali ne i po rasporedu raspisivanja poziva, ali tematsko područje kako je navedeno u našem programu suradnje je vezano za volontiranje. Meni je jako drago što smo nakon studijske posjete koju smo imali zajedno sa predstavnicima i djelatnicima Ministarstva regionalnog razvoja u rujnu prošle godine u Švicarskoj u Bernu upoznali i neke predstavnike organizacija civilnog društva. Jedna od njih je i sa nama, gospođa Martina, koju ćete čuti malo kasnije, i još dvije kolegice iz organizacije civilnog društva iz Švicarske koje će nam se priključiti online. One će vam predstaviti svoje švicarsko iskustvo. Nama je to bilo jako zanimljivo i korisno čuti. Obzirom da je nama jedna od ovih tema vezana za razvoj volonterstva u Hrvatskoj koje smatramo da je potrebno dodatno osnažiti. Za ovaj poziv namijenjeno je ukupno 1.191.000 eura, odnosno od strane švicarske doprinosa tu je 1.071.900 eura. Zapravo ne bih možda čitala ove sve iznose, vidite ih i na samom slajdu. Mikroprojekti, kao što su već uvodni govornici rekli, nama je potrebno u Hrvatskoj osigurati ravnomjeran regionalni, društveno-ekonomski rast i razvoj i ovaj natječaj je zapravo najviše usmjeren ka tome da se jačaju kapaciteti organizacije civilnog društva kako bi imali aktivniju ulogu u razvoju lokalne zajednice, u provođenju aktivnosti i mjera kako bi se riješili lokalni problemi. To su natječaji kojih će biti malo više nego ovih prethodno spomenutih. To će biti manje neki grantovi i njihovo trajanje će biti do 24 mjeseca, a nekakav prosječan iznos granta oko 85.000 eura. I četvrti program, da, ovo je malo pobjegla su slova, ispričavam se, ali mi se sve se vidi. Program društveno korisnog učenja također. Ovim pozivom nama je želja da se poveže, odnosno ostvari suradnja i partnerstvo između organizacija civilnog društva i visokih učilišta za provedbu programa društveno korisnog učenja. Uključivali bi se studenti, visokoškolski djelatnici u aktivno društveno korisno učenje i time bi se jačali zagovarački kapaciteti organizacije civilnog društva. Jer kao što znate, engleski prijevod, odnosno tematski ovaj program civilno društvo je usmjeren na građanski angažman i transparentnost. Kao što sam već spomenula, mi smo u rujnu imali jednu studijsku posjetu koja nam je jako puno koristila i nadamo se da će se i dalje nastaviti uspostaviti bilateralna suradnja između nas i organizacija iz Švicarske konfederacije, te da ćemo u daljem programiranju, odnosno u daljem raspisivanju natječaja i organiziranju ne samo ove početne konferencije, nego i drugih događaja koje planiramo u sklopu ovoga programa koji se odvija do kraja 2029. godine, da ćemo steći uvjete da se drugi doprinos pretvori u treći doprinos, ja bih rekla. Ja vam se zahvaljujem na pažnji. Ovo su web stranice gdje možete pratiti informacije Švicarsko-hrvatskog programa suradnje koju održava nacionalna koordinacijska jedinica, zatim podstranica Ureda za udruge i mail adresa generička švicarski program @udrugevlada.hr. Pratite naše web stranice, uskoro očekujemo objavu prvog natječaja vezano za održivi razvoj i nakon toga ću slijediti informativne radionice i evo, nadam se da ćemo dalje uspješno surađivati. Hvala vam lijepa. Ovo se ugasilo. Dobro. Ali sad bi trebala gospođa Martina. Da li imamo nekoga tu još iz tehničke službe? Zašto nam se ugasio? Jer... Čekaj, ovo ne radi.
Evo, rješavamo. Hvala lijepa gospođi Princivali. Čuli ste zanimljivu prezentaciju koja vam je predstavila program. Sada ćemo predstaviti Švicarsku konfederaciju u svjetlu civilnog društva i građanskog angažmana. Švicarska broji više od 100.000 udruga s pravnom osobnošću, dok je 3/4 švicarskog stanovništva u dobi od 15 i više godina učlanjeno u udruge ili neprofitne organizacije. Od toga broja 61% stanovništva aktivno sudjeluje u njihovu radu. Sportski klubovi imaju najviše članova, slijede igre, hobiji, rekreacijski klubovi, kulturne udruge i vjerske zajednice, crkve i crkvene organizacije, a većina tih udruga je relativno mala. Oni uglavnom funkcioniraju neplaćenim radom svojih članova i financiraju se članarinama i dobrovoljnim donacijama. Inače, u Švicarskoj se udruge mogu lako osnovati bez visokih formalnih zahtjeva i bez registracije, nadzora ili sustavne kontrole od strane vlasti. I sada će o nevjerojatnoj brojci od otprilike 1,8 milijuna volontera od populacije veće od 8 milijuna, te više od 800.000 osoba koje su radile i rade na volonterskim poslovima u udrugama, zajednicama i općinama govoriti naša sljedeća draga gošća koja nam je došla iz Berna, iz organizacije Benevol, gospođa Nina Gut-Weniger koja je pripremila prezentaciju. Izvolite.
Right. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you very much for inviting me today to come and share some of our experiences. It's a pleasure and I feel honored to be able to talk here and say a few words about volunteering in Switzerland and about Benevol, that's the organization I represent. Right, I want to start with just giving you a very brief overview of who we are and what we do before we go into more detail. As you can see, we are a center of competence for volunteering. That is to say that we deal with all sorts of questions around volunteering, but we are not ourselves a volunteer organization. We don't work with volunteers, apart from our steering committee. We offer services to a broad range of non-profit organizations, associations, public institutions who work with volunteers, and we also offer services to volunteers themselves. And our aim is to promote volunteering, to strengthen civil society, and also to strengthen the recognition of volunteer work in the public. Now, before we continue, I just want to make sure that we all talk about the same thing when we say volunteering or volunteer work. And I put together a very brief working definition with the most essential points for me. Volunteer work is a social contribution, so it can be a hobby. I can benefit from it if I volunteer, but it always serves some sort of greater good. It is unremunerated. We want to make a clear distinction between paid work and unpaid work. We do not want a grey area between that. It is carried out voluntarily, so no pressure, also no moral pressure. And it does not compete with paid work. That is to say, volunteering should not be done just to save money in an organization. Now, as you have already heard, volunteering has a strong and long tradition in Switzerland. And to illustrate that, I brought some figures. They were collected by the Federal Statistical Office, so they're quite official and reliable. As you can see, in the year 2020, 41% of the population said that they had been volunteering in the last 4 weeks. That, in Switzerland, is around 3 million people. They further said that they spent an average of 4.1 hours per week volunteering. And if now you do the maths, that sums up to a total of 640 million hours per year of volunteer work. Now, if you look at that figure, I think it becomes quite obvious how important volunteer work is to Switzerland, and that actually the entire system could not function without all of that volunteering that's being done. You can also see that we make a distinction between formal voluntary work and informal voluntary work. Formal means it is done through an organization, and informal is more spontaneous, more direct. So that could be one person seeing need with another person and supporting that person directly, but it is not institutionalized. Right, and I said I would say what we do, we being Benevol, and in order to show you how we are organized, you can see the map of Switzerland with its different cantons. You probably know that we have a federal system with the national level, the cantonal level, and the municipal level. And Benevol, the organization of Benevol corresponds to that by also being organized on a cantonal level. That means there's lots of different offices in the different cantons. And as you can see, almost every canton has an office, not all of them. There's some there in the middle which do not have a Benevol office, but generally we are covered. It is important to know that all of these offices are very different. They have different structures, they're organized in different ways, they have different forms of funding, and they all correspond to their local environment. On top of that, there's also Benevol and Benevol La Romandie. Those are umbrella organizations trying to have a bit of coordination between those different offices, which is not always easy because, as I said, they're very different. Me, I work for Benevol Canton Bern, so that's there, the big green one, which says BE. We are organized as an association ourselves. As you already heard, there's more than 100,000 of them in Switzerland. We have two offices, one is in Bern in the capital and one is in Biel. So we do have to speak German and French. That's one of our local specialities. We are funded through the Canton of Bern to 80% of our budget, so that's quite a generous contribution to us. We have a service contract. That means we're not project funded, but we receive a lump sum that we can use for aims that are discussed with the canton, obviously, and we also report on that. And we currently have 156 member organizations, and those are all civil society organizations working with volunteers. And we support them not financially, but with information, with knowledge, and so on. Those organizations also pay a little membership fee to us, and that makes up for the remaining 20% of our budget. Now, what do we actually do? I said we try to promote volunteer work and we promote the recognition of it. So we need to do lots of awareness raising. We do that through different forms of communication, obviously. Public events like the top picture, that was one of our events. Then last month, for instance, we had a little campaign in public transport where we produced some spots. And they were shown on screens, on trains, on buses, on trams. Maybe I can play them. Look at the guy who's cleaning up. Right? So you can see he was picking up rubbish, then everything becomes nicer, and the slogan at the end says, "Volunteers make the difference." The other one is similar, that's more to activate people and become volunteers themselves. Says donate time, volunteer. As I said, we provide information and advice mostly to organizations, also to municipalities, so the communal administration. They seek advice with us because they have to keep their civil society organizations going. We also provide advice to volunteers themselves. There it is mainly a matter of helping them find a good place to volunteer. They can come to us and say, I have a bit of hand-on time, what can I do? And then we find them a good place to go and invest. Or sometimes they come to us and they have a very specific idea about what they want to do. They say, I've been a teacher for my entire life, now I'm retired, where can I go and do some teaching? And we find them a good place to do that. We try to assure quality. We do that with our organizations, and they do that with their volunteers. We will get to that in a second. And we help organizations find volunteers. For that matter, we have an online platform. It's called Benevol Jobs, and it functions very much like an ordinary job platform, but it is only for volunteer work. It is quite successful. We register about 1 million visitors per year, and we have currently around 4,000 partner organizations which use the platform, and around 13,000 volunteers who try to find assignments through the platform. We also help organizations find volunteers through different ways. Sometimes we do events like, we call it a Benevol dating, where we rent a room and our member organizations can come and present themselves, and volunteers can come and they can find a good match. We also make calls in our social media channels and stuff like that. But obviously this platform is like one of the most important tools that we have. Then I said I would get to quality assurance. So it is on 2 levels. Benevol tries to assure a good working environment for volunteers within our member organizations. And our member organizations have to make sure that their volunteers do good quality work. So it's on 2 levels. For us, we have what we call the Benevol standards. That's a set of criteria that we require our member organizations to meet if they want to work with us. That is to make sure that no volunteers are taken advantage of, that they are treated fairly, that they can always leave if they want to leave, that they get their expenses covered, and so on. Whereas the member organizations have to protect the people who benefit from their services. They also have to protect their volunteers. They have to make sure that they do what they're supposed to do. And they should also provide training if needed. We train the coordinators in the organizations, and they train their volunteers. That much for our work. Now, as we have already heard, Switzerland has this strong tradition of volunteering, has a very strong and active civil society. People may ask themselves, why do people volunteer? What's their motivation? And I brought you some statistics. Those are also official numbers. Why do people volunteer? Any guesses? One wild guess? Somebody asked them to. Would it then be, or just ask friendly, so no pressure, because otherwise it's not volunteer work anymore, right? Yes, that could be. It's not the top answer, though. The top answer, you might be surprised, is because they want to have fun, so they consider it fun. Second answer is get together with other people, so there's the social aspect to it. Help other people. So some degree of altruism also involved in volunteer work. Make something happen. So you see something that you don't like and you actually want to influence it. You want to maybe inflict change through volunteer work. And number 5, I also find quite interesting, there's always the personal development. I can gain knowledge and experience through volunteering. I can maybe hope to improve my chances on the paid market. Okay. Thank you. As I have said in the beginning, volunteering can be a hobby, and as you can see here, it benefits the person who actually volunteers. It's not only for the benefit of the others, it serves some greater good, but it's also for my own benefit. And I've just put together some key points to show in which way people benefit from volunteering. It can provide meaning to their life, right? You could picture someone who does a job just for money. They don't really like that job, but they have some free time. They want to do something which actually gives them the feeling that they do something which makes sense. They could find that in volunteering. It provides social contacts because very often it is not done by one individual, but in a group. You can find appreciation. That's if your volunteer coordinator works well. Personal impact you can seek. It can give you a daily structure, especially for people who do not or not work anymore. It can give you insights in a new working field. You can expand your personal network. It creates training opportunities and so on. This is not a conclusive list, right? This is just some ideas of how the individual benefits from volunteering. It is not only the individual, though, who benefits, as I already said. It is society as a whole. And this, again, to close the circle, becomes obvious if you look at this number, 640 million hours per year. So Switzerland, the system of Switzerland largely depends on it because volunteering relieves and supplements the welfare state. It promotes participation and integration. It encourages innovation. This is a factor which should not be neglected because volunteering, if you do volunteer work, you usually have much more freedom than when you do paid work. And this freedom, this space for innovation can be used by the organizations who work with volunteers if they know how to use it. Obviously, volunteering directly improves the well-being of individuals. Those are namely those individuals who benefit from the services that civil society organizations offer. And as we already saw, it can provide meaning and a sense of belonging to the people who do volunteer. Now, this all sounds great and very easy and wonderful, but also in Switzerland, we face some challenges to that system. I tried to make an arrow which goes in two directions. So on the one hand, we have more and more need for volunteer work, and this is going to probably increase still in the next years because of the demographic development. People are getting older, society is getting older, and the welfare state is going to face great challenges, I would say, and volunteer work obviously can help in that field. The question is, to what point can volunteer work actually supplement the welfare state? And I think there we need a bit of a dialogue, not only within my organization, but on a whole society level. On the other hand, we have those mega trends that you all know very well. We have the individualization, mobility, digitalization, and that can make it a bit more challenging for civil society organizations to find volunteers and to keep volunteers. Because traditionally, at least in Switzerland, you lived somewhere and you probably lived there for the bigger part of your life, and you had your roots there. Then there were those local associations and you joined them because that's what you do. And you stay with them and you volunteer with them. It was a bit self-evident. Nowadays, this is not the case anymore. People move around geographically, but also in their biography, and they don't do the same job for 10 years, they don't live in the same place for 10 years, and that also changes the way they volunteer. I like to say that we don't actually see a decrease in the willingness to volunteer, but we see shifts within volunteer work. The way I volunteer changes. It's not the same anymore as it used to be. And that makes it a bit, maybe a bit more difficult for organizations. They have to be creative, they have to be very professional to attract volunteers and to keep them. And my recommendation usually is create targeted incentives. So know your volunteers, know what they are looking for, know their motivations, and then you know how to respond to that. It usually helps to have project-oriented assignments, time-limited assignments, because it can be much more attractive for a person to do something of which they know that it only lasts for half a year and then they can go, rather than having the feeling that they need to do it for 10 years and then they can't say no, because it's very difficult to say, I do not want to do this anymore. It's much easier if there's an end to it and then you can just leave without having to say anything. Make it interesting and meaningful and create real opportunities for participation for the volunteers inside the organization. Yes, those are my main recommendations to that. And with that, I'm finished. Thank you very much for your interest. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Hvala lijepa gospođi Gutveniger. Moram vam reći da ako želite imate slušalice od traga za sljedeće prezentacije koje će doći, ako će vam olakšati praćenje cijeloga programa. Ja se nadam da nam štima tehnički sve. Ne, evo samo male konzultacije jer očekujemo 2 prezentacije koje bi trebale biti online, pa ćemo vidjeti što se tehnički događa. Evo isprike, dajte nam minutu da vidimo. Ovisimo o internetskoj vezi, tako da to je van naših... Evo, da riješimo tehnički... Dok uspostavimo vezu s kolegicom koja je u Švicarskoj, imate pauzu 10 minuta, nakon toga vidimo se ponovno ovdje u dvorani. Hvala vam lijepa. Još koja minutica strpljenja, pa onda krećemo s nastavkom naše konferencije. Evo, spremni smo za nastavak. Ostali koji su još na pauzi će nam se pridružiti u nastavku vremena koje je pred nama. Ponavljam, dok još uzvanici i naši gosti dolaze, imate slušalice od traga. Imamo dvije divne prevoditeljice koje će vam pomoći da pratite prezentacije koje slijede možda na lakši, jednostavniji način zbog detalja koji će biti u njima. I podsjećam vas da nakon sljedeće dvije prezentacije organizirano od strane Vladina ureda za udruge i obilazak akvatike, ovoga akvarija, pa nemojte otići, šteta je to propustiti, divno, jedinstveno u Hrvatskoj, a čini mi se u Europi, pa onda ostanite s nama. A mi sada iz Karlovca putujemo u Švicarsku, u Civic, jer je s nama online gospođa Martina Zigerer, izvršna direktorica Zivo Foundation, koja će nam prezentirati Zivo oznaku kvalitete. Neprofitne organizacije koje nose Zivo oznaku kvalitete koriste donacije svrhovito, ekonomično i učinkovito. Informacije daju transparentno i pouzdani su. Kako se stvarala vlastita oznaka kvalitete koja je prerasla u brand i koje sve kriterije trebate ispuniti kako bi imali Zivo, čućemo upravo od gospođe Martine Zigerer.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me and you see the slides. I will present you in the next 20 minutes about the Zivo quality sign for fundraising charities in Switzerland. The goal of our foundation is to strengthen trust between organizations which are collecting funds in the public in Switzerland. They should be trustworthy. And we also want to strengthen trust of donors that they put their trust in these organizations. So we are building a bridge between charities and donors. To do so, we have developed 21 standards for charities. We did this in a multi-stakeholder approach, so which means we involved charities, but also institutional donors, authorities, consumer protection organizations. So we have a broad background for the standards we have for the charities. And we have in place two processes, how charities can be assessed against these standards. One, an easy low-level process is a non-binding assessment. So you have within 30 days, based on the existing documents you provide to us, the charities will have a first answer whether we see deviations from the standards or whether we think it's probably fulfilled without in-depth analysis. But from our experience, we usually can tell, well, we don't think there is a big problem, or we can tell them, well, there are some points which will need to be clarified further when you go through a full assessment. And this non-binding assessment gives charity a low-level entrance into the world of the standards and how to improve and how to prepare themselves for an assessment against these standards. And at the end of this project, we also give to charities a recommendation whether we think they should apply immediately for the full process, whether we think they should make some improvements before they apply, or sometimes we tell them we think they are not ready yet to go through a full assessment. So this non-binding assessment is something for preparation. It's not something charities can use for collecting donations or for advertisement. It's for the internal purpose and to give them a base for decision how to proceed. And then we have developed a certification process for all the charities who want to be certified, because it's not a law, it's volunteer, but it's a good quality sign. It's a self-regulation standard. You can be assessed against. If you want to go through the full process, we will look in depth to the charity and the 21 standards we have for good behavior for charities who collect donations. And how are we doing this? Well, we have a process in place where we first collect data online. So we have a basic part of a questionnaire which can be fulfilled. And then we have, depending on which type of organization is applying for the process, you get a questionnaire for if you're an umbrella organization, whether you're a regional section of an umbrella organization, whether you're a single organizations, or whether you're a home, for example, for disabled persons. They are a little bit different type of charities. We have and different type of questions and documents we require. And then we also have some individual criteria, like is it a national or an international charity? What's its size? Different questions we ask from the charities so we can establish a risk profile according to our experience, and then provide a checklist, an individual checklist to see whether the charity is fulfilling our standards, because the standards are a little bit general, but then you have to look at the type of charity, and you're assessing to have an efficient and process of assessment. The assessment then follows different steps. First, again, we do a desk analysis from data we got from the charities. We start with like their constitution, their annual reports, their financial reports, but also we look at contracts, we look at public information on the website, we look at fundraising materials, and further on. Then we have a first idea whether we think the charity is meeting our standards or not, or we see some deviations. And then we meet with the charity, we visit them in their offices, and we give them a first result from what we have seen from the desk analysis, but we also clarify further points and further have maybe further questions with things we did not fully understand from the data they gave to us. Maybe they explain us a little bit more how they do the follow-up of project and things like that. At the end of the visit, we give the charity a report with all the points we have discussed, with all the deviations we have seen, with all the things we think they maybe need to address to be fully compliant with our standards. Charities get a chance then to comment on the standards or on the report, and then we have a proposal to our board whether to give the charity the seal we have or not to give it. So we have, as a foundations, we have a board of 9 members, and this is the body who takes the decision to provide the seal or not. We have an office of 7 paid staff, 7 employees, 1 representative for the French part, and we have external auditors who help us to do the analysis and the assessments. And ZIVO itself, it's also a foundation, but it's also under the supervision of the Swiss Federal Supervisory Authority for Foundations. And we have auditors who control our activities. And we have a court of appeal where charities, which if they are not, if they do not agree with the decision of the board, they could go to an appeal court. So this is the organization we have and the structure we work in. The seal, that's the seal the charities get if they successfully went through the application process and meet the standards. And they can use this seal for fundraising. They use it for public fundraising, but it's also good to have it for institutional fundraising because you can show to your donors that you have been certified by ZIVO. So donors in the public, 60% of donors who gave more than 200 Swiss franc in the last 12 months, which is about the average of a Swiss household or a Swiss person, 60% say they know the seal, they have seen it already, and 67% of those who know the seal, they say we pay attention always or often to the seal before we make donation. That's what we know from surveys. So for us, it's important not only to have standards and an application and an assessment process, but also a seal who is known in the public by the donors, and that's also part of our work to make this seal well known to the public and the donors. And of course, we have the charities, which with our seal, they help us. They are also interested that the seal is well known by the donors. We have 500 NGOs with our seal. We have big, well-known charities, but also many small ones, local charities, which are not very well known in the public, but they are also able to fulfill with the standards and to go successfully through our process. Now, what are we looking at when we do an assessment? Let's go a little bit more in details. We have standards regarding to public benefit, regarding to integrity, and regarding to corporate governance. It's about first 8 standards we have. So public benefit in Switzerland, it's not a term which is legally defined. We have our own definition, what we understand what an activity of a charity should be so that we qualify it as public benefit status. But we also ask tax exemption. That's something from the government. All the charities who have our seal, they also are tax exempt from the government. But our definition is a little bit stronger than the tax exemption. So we want to have them in social, humanitarian, social, cultural, environmental, natural, or animal protection field of activities. We have some principles about integrity. So if we see violation, of course, it's against our standards, but also we have a look how charities implement integrity in their organization. Do they have a code of conduct? Do they have some activities to make also this code of conduct to implement this in their daily work? Then we have standards about corporate governance. It's more like how are they structured, who is responsible, what is the board of directors doing, are they vested interests, are they independent people enough to really make a good and secure structure of the organization. We look at, of course, internal control system of the charity, and we also look at the remuneration board members and directors get from this charity, also from employees. Then the next field we look at is the performance of the charity. It means we look at efficiency, the cost structure of administration costs, fundraising costs, and project costs. We look at effectiveness. So is the charity acting in an impact-oriented manner? Then we look at how much money do they have? Do they have a lot of reserves, or are they reserves appropriate? And also, do they have a transparent communication about what they do and how they work, also in terms of efficiency and effectiveness? For the costs, we have developed a methodology, a definition and methodology how to calculate these costs. And we also have a calculator so that we really talk about the same thing when we talk about costs, because it's a difficult term. Administration costs needs to be a clear definition what you look at if you talk about this. And it's something which donors are very interested in. We also, when we look at impact, we also have a tool. It's very new. It's in French, in English, and in German, available on our website. It's a tool for charities, how they can plan their projects and their activities in an impact-oriented way. So it's an easy tool to develop an impact model, but also then to monitor according to this model the progresses you make. That's something we encourage charities now to use it, and we want also to see how they know they are making progress according to the impact they want to reach. Maybe you go on our website to have a look at it. It's really something very new, and we think it's something very useful also for the charities. Then we look at the finances. We have standards for annual financial statements. We have a standard about auditing of the independent auditing of these financial statements. And if they have a lot of money, then we also ask for investment regulations. For the annual financial statements, again, we ask more than the law does. We want to have a true and fair accounting, and there is a standard especially developed for non-profit organizations who are collecting donations. So that's a very important part of our standard, and often we have to help the charities a little bit to be transparent enough, but it's important for donors to know where the money goes. Then we look at the network where the charity is working in. Do they work in national networks? Do they work in international networks? And who is responsible in doing what? How do they know their partners? How do they select their partners? How can they be accountable for what their partners are doing? All these questions are addressed in Standard 16 and 17. And finally, we have a set of standards around fundraising and communications. So we look at charities at their fundraising campaigns. How do they raise funds? How do they convince donors? Do they not exaggerate? Do they not put them under pressure? Is it clear what is the cause, and are the donations also used for the cause which the donations had been raised for? Standard 19, it's all around data protection. Do the organization respect data of the donors, the privacy of the donors? It's a standard which became more important in recent years. And we also, in this standard, because the law has changed here, we look also if charities do implement new laws and regulations from the government, so we can be sure they are really up to date when it comes to data protection. Then we look at fundraising partners, if they work together with agencies or with commercial fundraisers, which they can do. But then we want to see contracts, and we want to be sure it's not a problem with too high rates or too behavior which is not, it's harming trust of donors. And at the end, we have a standard which helps it's only for the big organization. It helps to coordinate the fundraising, the mailings, and street or door-to-door collection, so that not everyone is addressing the households in the same 2 weeks of the year. Yeah, that was our standards in a nutshell and very briefly. We have the standards, but we also give help for implementation of the standards. We have manuals. I showed you the tool. We have also written documents. We have benchmarks. We have explanations how to implement and how to apply the standards. For example, for data protection, but also for accounting and fundraising, especially when we see some charities or many charities are struggling with an issue. We also try to help charity to comply with the standards, because we think if all the fundraising charities are following the standards, then we have a lot of trust in the sector. We have donors who know that they can trust the charities with our seal, but also the sector itself is strong in trust, and that's the credibility of fundraising charities, and that's what they need. And we hope to help them to successful fundraising. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you have questions, I'm here.
Ima li možda neko pitanje za gospođu Cigarežer? Evo, ima pitanje. Pričekajte da mikrofon. Gospođa vas čuje, prevoditeljica će to prevesti, samo da dobijete mikrofon, pa onda... Evo, trenutak, tehnički radimo li? Evo, mislim da je sad sve u redu. Pokušajte. Ne, nije. Samo malo strpljenja, molim vas. Dečki, što kažete? Zamijenit ćemo mikrofon, evo, pa ćemo onda biti sigurni. Ili možete doći ovdje meni, ako vam nije teško, da... Evo mikrofona.
Hello, my name is Željka. I would like to ask you, is your seal only for NGOs from Switzerland, or we can apply here from Croatia?
No, the seal is, the charity needs to be based in Switzerland. It means it has a seal, it has an office in Switzerland, and also the seal itself, it's known in Switzerland. It's not known in Croatia. So it would not be helpful, I think. You need to have a seal which the charities know, but also the donors know. And Civic seal is known in Switzerland.
But we can or cannot apply?
No, you cannot. Okay, it's only for Swiss charities.
So we have to develop our own seal in Croatia?
Yes, if you want to have something similar, I think all the seals I know, there are also in other countries, there are similar systems of charity monitoring with a seal and an assessment process, but it's always national. So the charities can work international, but the charity which applies for a seal will apply for the seal in the country where his headquarter is located.
Thank you.
Hvala lijepa. Imamo još pitanja? Ali vidim da ste si zadatak zadali još jedan s ove konferencije. Izvolite.
Hello, Ivana Kordić from Association Tatavaka now, but I was in my previous life part of, and was working and was part of a volunteer center in Zagreb. And maybe just to share, because we did have several extensive processes of working on quality management in Croatia for civil society organizations. In, I think, sometimes 2000s, we had Sokna, which was the first. It's an international label. So it was the first one which got relative recognition from not only NGOs, but also donors such as the National Foundation for Civil Society Development. But it was protected by a label. So it was by license. So that was the reason why it wasn't continued. And then we developed, several NGOs developed something called OK 2015. Organization Quality 2015, and that was a process which I really liked and was hoping that it will live up to your standard, but unfortunately, it's, at least from my view, it didn't. So my question to you is, what did you do to make it so popular and recognized both from the part of the donors, you know, in public sector, private sector, and the NGOs?
Thank you for this question. Unfortunately, I can't see you, but I can hear you, so I try to give the answer. Well, it takes time. For CIVO, CIVO is existing since 1934, I think. It was the first initiative. It also came out from the sector, from charities who said, well, we have a need. We have a need to give trust to the donors, and we have a need, now I can see you, and we have a need to build trust with donors. So it's important that, well, you have charities, maybe to start with, it can be a good way if you have charities who have this need, and then they help you also, they are interested also that donors know your seal, your standards, and they make it public also with their donors. And then you need a lot of communication also with the government, with institutional donors, and to grow your seal and to grow that donors know your seal. We do a little bit of advertisement, but it's also very expensive, so we could not do it only with paid advertisements. We need the charities who really put the seal on all their foundation materials, for example, and also the charities, if they talk to their donors, then they explain also what the seal means. So this is very important to make the seal well known.
Thank you. Još pitanja? Nema više pitanja. Ima pitanje, evo samo trenutak.
And maybe to add to the question before, also if you work with the government, with authorities, often they say, well, we cannot not only give money to those who have the seal because you are a private organization, but they can say, well, but the seal, it's an advantage. If a charity has the seal, it's an advantage also to work with government or to work with institutional donors. So that helps also to make the seal relevant and known among charities.
Another question?
Okay, thank you. Roland Piton from the Swiss Contribution Office, Swiss Embassy. I understand from your presentation that these requirements for getting this certification is quite high. It means the target group is already quite well established or large as NGOs, correct? Or what would be, let's say, some characteristic of the applicants. If they're too small, probably it's not relevant for them. What is the target group, and what is the cost of such a process for an NGO?
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you. Well, the first slides I showed you was about the process, the non-binding assessment. That's something which makes it easy for small charities also. And this non-binding assessment costs 500 Swiss francs one time. So that's very low level. And then the full process, the standards are the same for all the charities, but what we ask from a charity, what they need to give us or what they need to show us that we can say, well, yes, they comply with the standards. That's different whether you are a small charity or you are a very big charity. Also, the accounting standards, they have less requirements in details than for big organizations like the Swiss Red Cross. So we have also many smaller charities which apply for the seal and go through the process. The cost is for the first time certification, in the average, it's about 5,000 Swiss francs. There it depends on the hours we need to put in. Then they pay an annual fee. This is based on the size. So the small charities, it's very low fee. It's only, the lowest is 300 Swiss francs a year or 500. But then bigger organizations like Swiss Red Cross, for example, they would pay more than, they pay about 12,000 Swiss francs a year. So that's also how our structure is financed, mainly by these fees from charities. But we make the average it's about a 10-year average, because we do the recertification every 5 years. So you have low costs in between, but then if we do the recertification, maybe it's another 3,000 or 4,000 Swiss francs. But in the average, on a 10-year average, a smaller charity pays about 1,500 Swiss francs a year in the average. So we think it's not a question of cost, but it's a question maybe, are they ready to do the formal things they need to do? Are they ready to have clear structures? The workload is maybe more a problem than the cost itself.
Thank you. Pitanje još? Ima još jedno pitanje, evo u prvom redu, dolje desno.
Hi, my name is Stella Fischer from the Swiss Contribution Office, and just one small question regarding the organizations that have the seal. Are they listed on your website, or is the list transparent in terms of availability to, someone who would like to see which organizations have the seal?
Yes, of course. On our website, we have a database and a search engine. So you can, and we encourage donors, go to our website before you make a donation, look there if the charity has a seal. In our case, we only say, well, the charity has the seal. We say maybe the last recertification has been done 2 years ago, or the seal is valid until 2026 or something like this. Sometimes in the recertification, they do not fulfill maybe all the criteria when we do the assessment. So then we tell the charity, well, you need to fix a certain number of aspects, and so that you don't lose the seal. And that's something we tell to the charity in detail, what they have to do, and we control if they do it. But to the donors, we say, well, they have the seal or they do not have the seal. But in other countries, you find also models where the standard setting organization tells exactly if there is something which is not exactly in line with the standard. They would say the charity does not meet, has not 5 members on the board, for example. They only have 3, and our standards say they need to have 5. So that's something we do not do. We say they have the seal, they do not have the seal. And we also have some recommendations for donors with charities. We think they have a problem with transparency. So these are not the charities who went through our assessment. These are charities who are collecting funds, but we get complaints from donors. There is nothing we can find about them. So we think charities who harm the trust in civil society, sometimes we put some information on them on our website too.
Imamo li još pitanje ili možemo krenuti dalje? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I wish you a good day and good continuation with your conference. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Goodbye. Mi moramo nastaviti dalje. Dvorac Burgdorf star je 800 godina i kultna je znamenitost grada i regije Burgdorf. Impozantan kompleks, jedinstveni je povijesni artefakt i spomenik nacionalnog značaja. S nama je ponovno online, nadam se da je i da sve funkcionira, gospođa Tamara Suter, suvoditeljica edukacija i znanstvenog rada Muzeja dvorca Burgdorf, koja će nam predstaviti kako se odvija zajednički rad u zajednici na oživljavanju dvorca i preuređenju u turističku atrakciju te oblikovanje zbirke muzeja sa građanima.
Hello. Okay, I hope you can hear me. I thought the presentation would start for me and I didn't have to start it myself, but let me just do that quickly. I'm not sure where I can do it. Well, I don't find a button to start the presentation. I don't know if I have the right to start a presentation in this meeting.
Tamara, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You have a share button on Zoom if the
Yeah,
presentation is open. Yeah. So just share the screen you want to share.
So you have already opened the presentation?
No, you need to open it.
Sorry for the delay.
No problem.
I'm sorry, I did not give the rights to Zoom to open presentation, so I'll be back in just a second.
Okay.
From first presentation. Možemo li postavljati pitanje? Okay, yes. Yes, absolutely.
Evo, dobar dan, Jelena Princivali opet. Ako imate pitanja, slobodno možete postaviti sad dok riješimo ove tehničke poteškoće.
I'm back. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Now it should work.
Okay. Onda my part can be later if you want.
Okay. I think that works now, right? A big second. Okay, so sorry about the delay. I will make up the time without skipping anything. Thank you for inviting me to talk here today about our work in Burgdorf. I will first give you a little bit about background knowledge about our castle and about the structures we have, and then dive into the work we do concerning participation and how we can involve the community in our work. So this is Burgdorf. This is a small city or small town in the center of Switzerland. It's half an hour from Bern, and it's in the Emmental region, which is not a very touristic region. It has only started in the 90s to have aspirations to get more tourists on board. So that was a bit of a bad a setup for us, but we found a way around that, which I will talk about in a few minutes. First, a bit of history for the castle. The first remnants found of human presence on the hill are from the Bronze Age, and then the castle itself was built around 1200 by a local noble person called Berthold of Zeringen. And since 1200, so for the last 800 years, the castle has been continuously in use, first by dukes who made it their residence, and then by the city-state of Bern, who sent its local administrators to the castle to live there and reign over the region, which are called Schultheissen. And then after that, so in the 19th century, the castle was home to the administration again. It was home to a prison, and it was home to court. So there were courtrooms there. So not a very good way to present yourself towards the public. In the meantime, there was also a first museum that opened in the castle. That was in the 1890s. There was a small group of regional people who started to collect historical objects and displayed them in the Knights Hall. And that was actually one of the very first museums in Switzerland. And in the early 20th century, there was also another group of people who opened another collection, this time an ethnological one. They started the museum first in the city of Burgdorf and then also in the castle together with the historical collection. So there were already two museums in the castle. And then in the early 2000s, there was also a gold museum who opened its doors in the castle. So in the early 2000s, we had three museums in the castle. We had civic administrators in the castle with their offices. Then we had the prison in the castle, and we had the courtrooms in the castle. So quite a weird collection of people who were in that castle together. And then about 10 years ago, something changed in how the Canton Bern wanted to administrate their stuff. And long story short, this meant that the prison and the courtroom and the offices, they all left the castle. And then there was only the museums left, and for them it was financially impossible to stay in the castle, and so a new idea had to be found. And this idea was in fact the castle that is open to all. So you see how the castle today is divided into different kinds of uses. In red, you have the museum. Then in blue, you have the youth hostel. In dark blue, you have the restaurant. And then we have some spaces for events. And in yellow, you have also a small room where you can get married once a week. So that was the plan. And before this plan could be realized in 2020, there was a long period of working towards that goal, which started first, obviously, with finding the finances to transform the castle into what it is today. And the whole project, so the redevelopment of the entire castle, went from 2017 to 2020 and was about 17.8 million Swiss francs plus 2 million for the new museum. And that was funded by the canton of Bern, the lottery fund, the city of Burgdorf, and the Burgergemeinde Burgdorf, as well as obviously also industry, trade, foundations, local municipalities with whom we still work today and have a close relationship, and individuals who contributed to the finances. So during 2017 to 2020, we redeveloped the castle. This meant taking out the prison cells, for example. This also meant moving over 60,000 historical objects and ethnological objects to a new home, digitizing them, taking pictures of them, and creating a new online database for them. This meant transforming the castle to fit to modern standards of sustainability and comfort, for example, for the youth hostel guests, but also still in accordance with the heritage protection services, who obviously have their own ideas. So that meant a lot of talking together. And during that time, during the transformation period, we kept in contact with the public through public outreach programs like this project, which was called Mein Ding, so My Thing. And there we collaborated with local businesses and asked them to choose an object from our collection and put it on display. And in turn, they gave us some of their everyday objects, which we put on display in the entrance hall of the new museum. So fast forward to through the renovation period, we are now in 2020, and the museum, the youth hostel, and the restaurant have together opened the new castle that's open to all. And right from the start, one of the key questions during this time was, and still is, how can we really be open to all? Because as a castle, our history is one of exclusion. A castle is built to keep people out. It's on a hill. It's inaccessible. It was a residence of sovereigns. It was a place where you went to court. It was a place where you went to prison even. So it was anything but inclusive. And if we are honest, our historical collections, like almost all historical collections, were never supposed to represent all people. And the museum as an institution, and of course the historical discipline as well, they do the same. So they never represented the whole community, and they were always very selective about whose stories they thought were worthy to be told. So the question is, how can we change that? And we think we can change that by first offering an experience that is accessible to people from all kinds of backgrounds, not just those you would expect in a museum. So people maybe come to us because they want to sleep in the cheaper youth hostel, or because they go for dinner in a restaurant and sort of by accident find their way into the museum. And another way in which we attract people is also through public outreach programs. So we have public tours on Sundays, we have holiday programs, we offer our space to other organizations in Burgdorf for their events. And like that, people come into contact with us by accident and hopefully stick around a little longer. The joint occupancy by museum, youth hostel, and restaurant also helps us to be financially more sustainable, because people maybe, again, they maybe come for a wedding in a historical castle, and then stay in the restaurant for dinner, or maybe they come into the museum and then go for lunch in the restaurant. So this helps us to stay open all year round, which comparable museums and youth hostels, which are not in very touristic regions, cannot do. And this is obviously more sustainable for our staff as well. A question is also, how can we get people to stick around once they came into contact with the museum by accident? And we think an answer to that is by building a museum where history meets society. We do not want to create exhibitions for ourselves as historians, but we think as a museum, we serve the community and the living people and their stories. And we try to build a museum with the people, for the people. And the only way to do that is through participation. This means that participation means that we don't just want people to respond to questions we thought of or fulfill tasks that we came up with, but instead we try to ask first, how and where do you want to participate, and what kind of ideas do you have to bring to the table? And I want to show you that in 3 projects, and also tell you about the lessons we've learned during these projects. So the first project is the first new exhibition that we made in 2021. And we started out with a construction site in the future exhibition room. This construction site was open to visitors, and we asked them to create a collection with us. The subject of this exhibition was women's stories, so local women. And as you can maybe think, we tried archives and libraries and literature, but there is only so much you can find about women in the official historical records. And so we had to go another way and ask people what they remember, what they can tell us, what stories of women they think should be part of a museum. And this worked incredibly well. It was beautiful how it turned out, but only because we learned the lesson along the way. And the lesson is you have to go to the people and actually talk to them. We started out getting the word out and asking the people to come to us, come into the museum and tell us their story. This worked in 2 cases only, because people do not just come to you and tell you their story, but you have to invite them, and you have to go to their homes, and you have to ask them directly, and you have to tell them, yes, your story is actually relevant and interesting, even though so far history has been about so many other stories but yours. And this really helped. So most of the stories we got were actually from word of mouth. So we went to one person, and then this person recommended another person, and so far and so forth. So we then had a exhibition room in which we now tell the stories of 73 local women, as well as local women's organizations. And this is a very beautiful room, not only because you could see that for the living women who participated, they were so proud to have their story in the museum and to be part of official history, but also because every time you get a visitor going in there, they see stories that could be their mother's or their friends or their neighbor's story. And this changes something in how you perceive history as something that belongs to you as well. And the second project goes into quite a different direction. It's called Youth Lab or Schloss Kids, so that's Castle Kids then. This project is made up of 2 stages, first the Youth Lab and then the Schloss Kids. The Youth Lab starts in the beginning of the year, where a small group of local teenagers comes together, and they are asked to plan their own project. The only parameters we give them is it has to take place in or around the castle. it has to do with local history, and there will be a week-long summer workshop where 25 other teenagers and you will together realize this project. So that were the limits. And it was incredible to see how quickly they started to make plans and then rethink their plans and adjust according to the museum standards, and they started to identify with our boundaries and what we could do financially and what we could do not, and how to take into account the visitor and the other teenagers, and became experts in local history and started to use their free time to go into the museum and get more ideas and be inspired. And I've got some impressions from the project week for you, and it was just beautiful to see there how quickly the project was not just something these teenagers participated in, but actually it was something they felt responsible for, and they co-created with us. They were so committed, so they showed up for the pre-launch, the official launch. They gave a press conference and interviews to the TV even, and many of them returned year after year again, and there are so many more projects they have up their sleeves to be realized. And the lesson we learned from this project actually started with the previous project, where we also wanted to do something with teenagers, and we thought of something amazing, and we went into a school class and we presented the school class this amazing idea, and absolutely nobody found it interesting. And obviously the results of that project then were not that convincing. It was good in the end, but nobody really had a blast doing it. And when we turned it around and started to include the teenagers from the very beginning on, and started to give their voices more weight, the whole atmosphere turned around completely. And that is something we learned, that with participative projects, you cannot expect other people to do your thing, but you have to start from the very beginning with the other people. And the third project I want to talk to you about is about bringing more diverse voices into the museum. As I told you at the beginning, we do not only have historical objects in the museum, but also ethnological objects. And that puts us as a small regional museum right in the center of the ongoing debates about racism, about power, about decolonization. And we wanted to have these debates very much publicly. And so we invited this group of people to go through the museum with us, through the permanent exhibition, and think about how we display objects, what kinds of objects we display, and what stories we tell. And then their task was to create a new video tour that lives from their personal perspective on our exhibition and allows the visitors to get into touch with new perspectives. And this video tour will premiere in April. So we're in the final steps of creating it, but it will be also quite beautiful as well. You see some impressions again from their work. And here we again saw how necessary it is, if you do participative work, to have enough time to do it and enough money to do it, and to have a person who is really able to provide, to be on a personal level with the people who participate, because it all only works with personal relationships. And one more thing I want just to mention very briefly, that was not part of my slides actually, but I cannot not mention them, is our volunteers, because they add so much value to our museum, and most of them have been with us since the transformative period, since the very beginning, and they work in all aspects of the museum, in the collection, in the exhibition, and in the events. And we also started the medieval reenactment program, and there we are really happy to see also very young people joining the volunteering program, so between 20 and 30. So I summed up some of the lessons we've learned here, and I think for us, the most important lessons for participative projects is that they need so many resources, but they are incredibly rewarding. And it's not easy because you do not just work with objects, but with people, and you work with people's problems and interpersonal differences and fights and changes of ideas and stuff like that. But you also get new ideas about what knowledge and skill can be, and you get new perspectives and new criticism that from your own point of view you cannot even think of. We are convinced that we can only tell the story of the region together with the local community, and that history is made up of stories, and so far only very few of them have been told. And while these participative projects need many resources, they enable a deep connection between the population and their museum, their cultural heritage. And this builds on an understanding of participation where people participate at all stages of the project and where we share power, knowledge, and decision-making with them. Because as a museum, we serve the people and their right to memory. So thank you. I'm sorry I took longer than expected. And if you have some questions, I would love to answer them, or you can just write me an email. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. Imate li pitanja za Tamaru? Ne? Nema pitanja? Ne? Tamara, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Ukrast ćemo 10 minuta još vremena u našoj organizaciji jer smo obećali da ćete moći postaviti pitanja, tako da evo, prilike može mikrofon u prvi red, gospodinu smo ostali dužni da postavi pitanje, pa ćemo onda poslušati kome to pitanje je i namijenjeno.
Yes, thank you very much. In fact, I have a question about Benevol, what was presented later. I often hear the statement that volunteering is the privilege of rich people, rich family or rich country, because they have time, they have time to dedicate, they have the possibility to dedicate time for volunteering, whereas for families or people that are more, let's say, under financial pressure or they have more difficulties to dedicate time to others. How you feel it with your experience? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I think the key is to look at the definition of volunteering. When you remember what I showed you in the beginning, we consider this formal, institutionalized way of volunteering, which the Museum Schloss Burgdorf is one wonderful example of it. And yes, I agree. If you look at what these kids are doing there, if they had to contribute to the family income and if they were struggling, obviously they couldn't go to the museum and develop their own project. But then there's also the other part, the informal way, where one person helps out another person directly. And I think that bit of volunteering is probably very, very well developed in other countries where people struggle a bit more than in Switzerland. Even in Switzerland, if you look at the graphs, Switzerland is known as the country of associations with our 100,000+ of them, sorry. Even there, the informal part is actually bigger than the formal one. And I would assume that in other countries, this is even more so. So you might have just different proportions, but I would assume that the total is not necessarily smaller. It's a matter of what you consider volunteering.
Thank you. Imate li još pitanja? Ne nužno za Benevol, možete za bilo koju od prezentacija koje ste čuli u prvom dijelu. Jelena je ovdje. Želite li postaviti pitanje? Ne. Dok vi još malo razmišljate, ja ću vam reći da smo na kraju ovog našeg formalnog druženja. Bile su zanimljive prezentacije. Vidim da ste puno toga zabilježili. Nadam se da kad se sretnemo možda za godinu dana će biti nekih rezultata od svega toga ovdje u Hrvatskoj. Sada su nam organizatori, Ured za udruge Vlade Republike Hrvatske, pripremili i 2 vođene ture kroz akvatiku. Prva će biti od 30 ljudi na engleskom jeziku. Trebate se popeti gore na kat ako želite u toj prvoj turi. Druga će biti isto tako 30 ljudi na hrvatskom jeziku. Nakon toga organizatori vas pozivaju na ručak, a ja ću vam u ime organizatora, svih naših gostiju i svih prezentera reći od srca hvala vam lijepa i uživajte ostatku dana.